Hello, and welcome to the Swim Brief. This is a Thursday edition where we talk about what's going on in the world of swimming and maybe sometimes not even in the world of swimming. Joining me from his permanent vacation from coaching with a shirt that finally acknowledges it, Joel Rawlings. How are you, Joel?
Yeah. Great. For those at home, again, it takes about 3 years for you to reach in your closet and not pull out something that has either a school emblem, school name, or school colors on it. So this is definitely one that has none of those things.
You're just in a Hawaiian shirt mood today. You just thought, like, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Beautiful day outside in Oregon.
Yeah. It's like 60 and rainy. It's like another day in Hawaii.
And joining us from the Olympic Trials prep bunker in the Houston, Texas area, Erik Weichen. Erik, are you ready? Are you ready for Omaha?
I am ready for Omaha. I've got my vaccine through the 2-week period and got my travel stuff figured out. And the only thing that's left is whether or not I'm going to see any human beings outside that 11-day bubble. So fingers crossed I can see other people other than the ones that I'm working with constantly. So, but Omaha's looking really good right now.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I mean, I'm this week on my roller coaster, which we addressed earlier in the week. I'm starting to trend like towards a more confident place with American swimming. You know, after the last couple of weeks of results, I'm starting to believe a little bit. I'm still, event specifically concerned, like women's 100 freestyle is still like, I still wake up in cold sweats in the middle of the night and go, but I think we're going to get there. So listen, we want to address something on this podcast that from the meet the past weekend. And I don't ever want to be accused of going after low-hanging fruit, but some people in the Swim Swam comment section, okay, of these amazing Michael Andrew races seem to assert some of these armchair experts. And we're not, I may be sitting in a desk chair, and I don't know, you guys actually seem like you're sitting in armchairs, but we're no armchair experts, okay?
Oh.
We're not. No, we're not, Joel. That's what I told you to say before we started this thing, okay? We don't look at Michael Andrew and say, gee, his way of swimming doesn't really comport to what I think somebody should look like. If only he swam like what I thought he should look like, he would go a lot faster. But I see a lot of that in the Swim Swam commentary section, and very specifically in regards to what's going on with his legs in butterfly. So we've had some text discussions back and forth about it. I called Uncle Milt in Tasmania and, had 20 minutes of a conversation with him on one hilltop. And then he had to break off the phone conversation on the nature preserve and go to the other hilltop and call me back, so we could finish talking about it. But I want to get your take as well. Erik, like, what do you think about Michael Andrews swimming when you watch it?
Full disclosure, I am a USRPT homer. For those of you who
I was going to
don't
say
like
fanboy,
it,
but go ahead.
Yeah, no, fanboy, all of it. Whatever terms you can come up with, I'm all for it. I am loving every minute of this young man's success and what he's doing to buck years and decades of this is the way it is and this is the way it should be, and it's showing up in his stroke. And for the longest time, I had some of those thoughts, and it still visually looks just different, and that's something that I personally have to deal with on my own. But just watching him swim, it's one of those things where it's like, it's 50.8. Like, I don't care. It's 50.8 in the 100 fly, and it's not his final meet of the season. Like, this is great stuff. Like, he's having a lights-out weekend. Yeah. Things are going really well. He's doing something right. So maybe the way that we have been thinking about things is not entirely. So there are some tweaks, obviously, I think that could happen. But as far as adding that other kick, 50.8, is that extra kick going to make him 48.5?
Right.
Not during the swim, I can't imagine. But I mean, I was trying to mess with it in the pool, trying to swim with 2 strong kicks, and it was jacking up my butterfly. My butterfly has become very shallow too, so I was trying to put myself in that place. And although I couldn't subtract that kick and only do, the one, I've really realized that my kicks, more than anything, are just keeping things at a level to make sure my arms are doing what they're capable of doing and not messing up my buoyancy. So before you just get into an anger-induced rage about it being not Michael Phelps, just take a moment and realize that maybe Phelps didn't need to dive his chest towards the bottom every stroke.
Well,
just saying.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's really interesting to me. Michael Andrew is such a lightning rod of a swimmer. Like, I'm a huge fan. I think basically we're all huge fans. So you're not going to get like the anti-Michael Andrew take on this podcast if that's what you were hoping for. But it seems to be like one of those things that almost really polarizes people, where they either seem to be huge fans or they seem to be hugely critical in a way that I don't know translates over to a lot of other swimmers out there. Like, I don't think Michael Phelps was terribly polarizing in that way, or even some of the other sort of, like, I guess you can't really compare anybody to Michael Phelps because it's incredible, but another athlete like on the level of Michael Andrew, I just think he wasn't as polarizing. And all I can deduce is, first off, that USRBT is polarizing. And yes, we've heard some stuff that nobody really knows what's going on. Would love to talk to somebody who really knows what's been going on training wise. But he has definitely branched out a little bit, I would say, from USRPT orthodoxy from what I've heard, but still that's like somehow not good enough for people. It seems like, people who are fans of USRPT are the ones that are still in his camp. I think the other part of this that can make swim coaches really upset is there's a part where we believe that, swim coaches are like the keepers of the flame, and we know we have all the knowledge that you need to get really fast at swimming. And, parents don't have the knowledge. So I think it's really triggering that his dad coaches him, and that somebody from the swim coach fraternity basically hasn't been allowed in to, put a stamp on this success. And I think a lot of coaches think like, oh no, like, the most talented kid on my team is going to think that they can make the Olympics with their dad coaching them, which might be true. It's hard to admit. It really challenges your ego as a swim coach. Joel, what do you think when you watch Michael Anderson? What kind of emotions does it stir up in you?
I think there's a lot to what you've said there. One thing, like what Eric said about like Phelps not pressing his chest, I think Phelps did need to press his chest that hard. I mean, that stroke worked for him. And I think too many times we get into this idea like one training philosophy is the only training philosophy, one stroke pattern is the only stroke pattern. Michael Andrews got a body type much, much different than Michael Phelps. And what I compare it more to is like a Sarah Solstrom kind of a butterfly, where it's a little more flatter kind of a butterfly. And what it comes down to, I think, for him is his ability to keep engaged and keep pressure on the water and work in time with the water, rather than like trying to, I've got this pattern of stroke, like a wind-up toy dropped in the tub, and I'm going to make that stroke fit no matter what the water's like. His stroke pattern works really well for him. The way he keeps pressure on the water through his like torso, through his thighs like that, without that second kick, he might actually be moving faster through the water without a second kick. And I think if all of a sudden you start to say, okay, well, we'll just add this, the energy consumption is going to go through the roof. It's going to change everything else that he's done. And so again, it's a stroke that works for him. And I don't understand why people are like, well, you have to have it like this. And I know back when I would coach too, you'd see swimmers going by like, well, if I could coach them, like maybe I'd get them all to go reverse, looking really fast, but actually swimming very slow. I mean, sometimes strokes don't have to look like you imagine they have to look. And you look back in old Olympic films and things like that, strokes are all over the place. They're so different, but yet they're still going pretty fast. So there's things that individually work with people, whether there's time with their nervous system, whether there's time with their body type, whether there's time with just the position of the lungs in the body. That's for us to kind of hop on that. I think the hate kind of comes from almost like a marketing thing where I think sometimes when you look at this, maybe the guy's he doesn't come off as likable as like a Caleb Dressel does.
Right.
And I have no idea. I've never met the guy. I've never talked to him. I don't read the stuff as much as Erik does, obviously. So I don't know if what he's like at all, but it just kind of comes off differently. And so I think it could be a marketing thing, but also it could be kind of what you said. It's kind of like his dad coached him, which isn't a bad thing. I think too many times we're getting hung up in the idea of what a stroke has to look like, that we're just like kind of getting metrics into swimming where like, this is the stroke that you have to have. And then you're teaching that fundamental rather than how it fits in. Like going to basketball camp, all you do is you work on dribbling, and you work up on layups, and you're not connecting anything there. And so the game changes a lot. The same for this, where the body keeps on changing. And in a sense, the race always changes based on the waves and where you're at in the race. And also, I guess, so much to unpack with that is it could just be kind of hatred towards, he's so out there with USRPT. Kind of like I joked one time about veganism, where like people keep on throwing this at you. After a while, you're like, that's it. I'm going to have a huge steak just to spite you. You keep on hearing USRPT. You're like, that's it. I've had it.
Yeah.
But I think as coaches, sometimes we have to stop and kind of do the devil advocate of ourselves and think about what we're doing right. Not someone's doing something better, but like, this works. This works for him. Good. It's maybe not for me, not for my kid. But then you should stop and be devil's advocate. It's like, is what I'm doing with my kids the best thing? So rather than hating outward, going, what can I learn from all of these things?
Yeah. I think, when I just to recap some other wisdom I derived from Uncle Milt here. I think the couple points that he made in talking to me about it, and he promised he would get back to me after watching. He didn't even watch the most recent races, of course. And I haven't heard from him since then, but, and I probably won't. So,
no.
But, he did make the point that first off, we should be thinking about, and this echoes the point that both of you made, like he is going extremely fast. Perhaps instead of being so critical of what it is he's doing wrong, we should be thinking about how what he's doing actually helps him to go really, really fast.
Yeah, like coaches, we have to look at what's working versus we're always looking at what is not working.
Right.
And it's weird for us to flip the script. Yeah.
Yeah. So flip the script on that. And then, just a very practical point. I think there's a really healthy discussion to be had here about propulsion and what your legs do on butterfly, and whether, for different swimmers, how much is it about propulsion? How much is it about just keeping a good position in the water so that you can continue to swim forward? And what I see on it is, wherever that other kick is supposed to be, I'm doing scare quotes here for people who aren't watching the video version of this, is, his legs stay close to the surface of the water. So maybe he's actually conserving a ton of oxygen, a ton of energy by just not moving his legs very much at that point. And it allows him to keep moving quickly through the water and could be giving him a huge advantage, So this thing that, looks at first glance as a weakness could be a huge strength for him. I do think, and listening to you, there is one more factor that, we're not going to get into the intricacies of it, but I do see that there's actually, you brought up veganism, and there is a holy trinity here, pun intended, of stuff with Michael Andrew. There's the USRPT stuff on one corner. There's the coached by the dad stuff. And then he's a very religious person. He speaks very openly about it. He talks a lot about it in interviews. And that's 3 third rail topics, for people in general. So where you can find a reason to get really fired up about it in one way or another. I happen to be an atheistic person who's a huge fan of Michael Andrew, but I can see how other people would be really turned off by the religious talk. So there's a lot going on there that, evokes a lot of passion from people.
Definitely.
Erik, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you bring a lot of this stuff up, and being, living in coaching in Nebraska and being in Region 8 with them when they were in Lawrence, and seeing a lot of the early interviews and hearing a lot of the early interactions, it was very, very off-putting in the way the conversation was having, or at least that's the way that it was for a lot of coaches who were in the camp of, traditional hashtag works kind of stuff. And all of a sudden it was this person having this idea and coming about it, but then delivering it in a way in the public format that was really just detrimental to USRPT as a movement. If that was the creation, was for it to be a movement, then the way that you speak to this stuff is really, really important. And seeing the interviews that there were, and everything has shifted. If you watched this from beginning to end and been there for when the polarization really started at 14 and going pro, those first 3 years were very, very live wire, very hard to deal with if you're not really into USRPT. But now everything has been very different in a lot of ways, and I think it's just taking more time for people to be okay with what happened than what is right now. So, and I was a part of that group that, even though I was very much in support of USRPT, it really struggled with that public message and how it was, scoffing at people who were doing 10-4s or whatever it is and 9K practices and stuff like that. And it's really hard to get people in your corner and listen to you if you're just going to badmouth 95% of the club swimming population. So I think things are definitely different. He's speaking really well about things, and they're very open about what he's doing now between weights and then supplementing with surfing and paddling and stuff like that. And I think you do see some of that surfing in his butterfly. If you think about it, it is very flat and shallow, and
you can tell he's been swimming in the ocean a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely seems to be doing him some good. I'm hopeful that this trend continues with him and in the water, and there's more open dialogue and just more positive conversations when it comes to the message that's being put across as just another person trying to do it a different way, and let's be okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and your point made me think of this, and I've heard this from a number of sources. One thing that has changed for him as well is, as he's gotten older and he gets to a higher level and he's made some teams to represent the U.S. internationally, and he's been on training camps and meet preps and stuff for these meets with coaches from all around the world. The feedback you get from other coaches, other sort of more traditional coaches on Michael Andrew is glowing. Again, I have the third hand, because of where I am in the office, I have the third hand reports from Greg Troy. But from what I hear, Greg Troy was like, this kid works as hard as anybody I've ever coached. Right. So he gets respect from people. Everybody that actually runs into him and sees him go to work, they know that there's something to relate to in the way that he prepares for all this stuff. It's not it's not all magic and trickery, and
there are no shortcuts in USRPT because there's no room to have shortcuts because there's nothing there to fall back on.
Right.
There's not.
So I think when people have been confronted with the reality of how it is he's actually preparing, I think pretty universally, that can sort of diffuse, and there's just a lot of misconceptions out there. Okay. Now the topic that I know both of you guys, when we were in the prepreration for this, we were like, can we please talk about European championships? We don't always talk about American results. I know, Joel, I know you wanted a chance to say Renomi Chroma with JoJo a couple times. So, you just weave that in there as you want, so you can get that point across. But listen, I, as a dual citizen of the United States and a country in the European Union, I, of course, am probably a little bit more interested and having coached there in the results. So I've got my own ideas about it. I'll go back to you, Joel. Just give me something that you care about from the European Championships.
So of course, like when you drop the idea of European Championships, I'm like, I'd already find something. But it's funny because I was talking to one of our master swimmers, and he was on the Russian national team back in the early 90s. And so we were talking about Russian swimming. So I've actually been watching a few of those swims. And not that I can do the names any justice, but the sprinting is amazing going on right there.
Yeah.
Got a great backstroker. It just lit it up.
Clement Kolesnikov.
So the thing that's really cool is I haven't seen Russian swimming in a long time, much less a lot of the European swimming. And as we're talking about Michael Andrews' stroke being a unique stroke, but working for him, the thing that is, as I was watching a lot of these races was I remember it used to be like 90s, 2000s, stuff like that. You could see an Eastern European freestyle. You know exactly an Eastern European freestyle when you see it, but now they're looking a lot different. Like that backstroker, the tempo he's got going, that's something that I think in the Eastern Bloc kind of countries wasn't valued. It was always distance per stroke, power, must have, very linear kind of things.
Right.
And the strokes have all evolved, and they're looking a lot more similar, which can be a good thing, but also a bad thing. So I think a lot of the things that used to be in strokes that were actually kind of detrimental are starting to get kind of pushed out as people are starting to experiment a little bit more. And I think that experimentation is pretty cool. And again, like Swedish swimming, you'd always see like 50, they can do a 50 really well, 50 fly. Championships is always about the 50 swims. And it's really cool again to see how the 200s are progressing like that. And I think one of the biases, and I just kind of started to think about, was we used to always think about like the United States and like them getting the gold medals and them. So it was always like us, world, because It was like the world in a sense was so far back. And I was talking to a national team coach just the other day, and he's saying it's like, the thing is, United States swimming isn't slipping. It's doing really, really pretty well.
Right.
There's just a lot of really good swimming going around, and not looking at the world versus the U.S. It's like we're competing against so many different relays. I mean, the Russian relay is going to be really good. The British relays are going to be amazing. And it's going to be a lot of fun swimming. And it doesn't mean the U.S. has gone backwards. It's just, again, things have all risen up together so well. And it's really cool just to see, again, how strokes progress. I used to teach a swimming, coaching competitive swimming class, was watching like just the 92 or 96 Olympics, which doesn't seem that far for us. What a world of difference it is between now and 2020, 2021 kind of swimming. The use of underwaters, the breakouts, just how clean all those things.
Remember Dennis Pankratov with the underwater skull as he dolphin kicked?
Yeah, but the cool thing is when you see all that is like with Michael Andrews, like you can kind of take something like, let's play around with the age groupers and see if something kind of comes out of that. Right. And I think that's what we're seeing now as more international swimming becomes televised and more United States swimming becomes out there, how that kind of goes into the age group program where you can play around with a lot of that stuff, and see it mature and develop. So that's what I'm terrible with names, I'm terrible with the numbers, but again, just watching, if you kind of like blur the eyes a little bit and just watch systematically how the swimmers are going, you can't pick out like you used to. Oh, there's an Eastern European distance swimmer right there.
Right. Yeah, no, it was funny you mentioned that Eastern European freestyle, because I remember I had a Russian swim coach very briefly when I was coming up. He was probably one of the worst coaches I ever had. I called him the Russian Dick Jokums because he only had 2 practices, okay? He was a swim coach, and then his other job was he was a massage therapist for the Boston Celtics, okay? His name was Alex Snagor. I think he's still out there coaching somewhere. And literally the only 2 sets we would do would be repeat 400 IMs or repeat 500 freestyle. And the only thing that would change would be sometimes we'd put paddles on for the 500 freestyles. And I swam very poorly for Alex Snagor. I think it's forever burned in my mind that I went to a meet and I swam the 200 breaststroke 24 seconds over my PB, which for people listening at home is not great. But I remember him also dispensing all sorts of nonsense wisdom, one of which was, about how much better Russian stroke technique was. And he had very much come up in this system where, like this very hierarchical, old Soviet system where somebody at the top goes, this is how you swim freestyle, as you say, like distance per stroke, get this, put your elbow here, to the very mechanical kind of discussion of how to do stuff. And, he believed really, really fully that it was the best. He also once told me that if he had a gun, he thought I would swim much faster. And then told me a whole story about running through an
think he's
obstacle.
kind of dead on with that one, though.
He's absolutely correct. I would be very motivated. May not be the best coaching technique or tactic you could use, but he was right about that. Eric, okay, with that diversion on Russian swim coaching out of our way, Eric, what were some of the highlights for you as I force you to view another continent's results?
It was really interesting to try to look through the results and read it without a whole lot of context, because I don't have a background in any other countries' like plans in terms of trials and how they're getting there. So it's like, I understand that European championships are important, but where is it in the context of their season, and are they really resting for it? We heard with there are some athletes that are resting. This is their final taper opportunity, where others maybe, training through it. Adam Peaty is 57 mid, so obviously he's not really, really sharp, but I can't imagine that he came into this super, super low by any stretch of the imagination. But just, seeing a lot of the stuff that's out there. I went through more of the results. Truth be told, I didn't watch a lot of the race videos, so it was good that Joel did a bit of that.
Between the two of you, you guys know what's going on.
Yeah, we're one person, right?
Into one.
But just, reading some of the articles there, seeing some of the countries' records coming down, and it's really nice to see some of that progress in some of these other non-traditional swimming countries. A lot of records coming down in some of the 400 free relays on the guys' side. It was interesting to see some of the mixed relays. It seemed like some of them were kind of serious about it, while others it was just a bit of a throwaway, participating to participate. So I don't know if it was just a matter of the medals and the points and the money, and that's why they were in on it, or getting some guys and some girls extra swims. Right. It really was tough to see. Some of the things that were really interesting, and you brought up the whole butterfly streamline thing, and Balak doesn't really have a tradition. I think it's Balak. Is that how you say it? Or Bilak? The Russian butterfly.
Hungarian.
Hungarian. It's Hungarian. My bad.
Christoph,
that's right.
I say Milak, but you know what I mean? None of us, nobody here on this podcast knows how to pronounce a Hungarian name properly. So
no, but it was interesting that they're going, they have such strong two flies in Hungary. I don't know what it's just a genetic predisposition or just mentality of it is to fly, and they do lots of fly. But his streamline is unconventional.
Are you going to fly? Yeah.
Yeah. His streamline is a bit unconventional. It's a bit more loose and maybe flowing, and it's not as, strangling the back of your ears tight as maybe a Phelps or many other American flyers. But it was good to see some of the results as they were coming through and just having a better idea. I could say some of the names, being from Wisconsin and having a few Polish friends down on the south side of Milwaukee, I was able to identify some of the names and be able to say them. But, by and large, there were some solid swims. There was some head scratchers because I've never read some of these names. But, within 8 seconds on the men's mile, we've got Hansen on the women's side with that one breast being 105 and being kind of surprised with that. And like Joel said, the sprints were really, really interesting to see. And then some of it was just kind of a bit of a surprise as far as where, distance freestyle in the U.S., it really is kind of basically like Ledecky, and and we don't have any kind of mile or distance that's great here in the U.S., but the mile on the men's side is very strong over there, and the 8 seemed to be okay on the women's side, but it's hard to put in context because Ledecky
just blows your whole
so she just kind of throws the whole thing out of the water. But in any event, it was refreshing to see results and then just tried to figure out what it all meant in the context of everything. It does seem like things are going to be really fast at the Olympics if a lot of these names can put it together and get it right in prelims to make semis that much more exciting. And it seems like those semi races are going to be real tough. Women's 100 breast, men's 200 free, like just two that are off the top of my head that are going to be really knockdown, drag out fights to see who's going to be in the top 8. So just hopeful there's a few U.S. names and, sprinkled throughout some of those final 8s.
Well, I think you bring up something really important there that's, I think, is good context for these results. So you talk about, trying to figure out what this meet really means. And one of the things I didn't learn till I went over there to that continent is, you want to like see what these competitions correspond to in the U.S. Like, I think for sure the one that's really corresponds the best is the European Junior Championship and USA, like a combined USA Junior Nat results sheet. Those two are very well like compared. But when you talk about like a European Championships, we just don't have anything like this, right? Because it's an international competition. So on that piece of it, you can't directly compare it to like a U.S. national championship, even though the level of swimming in some cases may be pretty close. There's just something, I think, that elevates it a little bit where you have people going beyond their country. But I would say, these meets have a strong history of, there's just some people who can't, who do really, really well at the European Championship level who can't translate that to Olympic success. Like there's been some swimmers over history and even, sort of you go down to like a European short course or whatever, of course, short course, long course stuff. But like, the meets sort of go down in level, and it's just really tough to translate some of these results to the Olympics. It's just, whether it's the comfort level, the pressure level, or whatever, things change when you get to the biggest competition. My big highlight that I want to discuss is, of course, I was looking at relays on the front end. People listening to this podcast know I had Sina Bro, somebody that I coached when she was, pretty young, on this podcast. She won another 53 in the 100 free, so I was pretty excited for her. She's going to be swimming in the Olympics, and I know that she's not, tapering for this meet. So I'm really hoping for her that she can produce a better result than that, and maybe make her way into a semi at the Olympics. I know that would mean a lot to her. I know that's kind of the goal for the meet. So, but Femke Heemskerk, for people who've been following the news with her for a year, like I didn't give any context to you guys. I just said like she split 51.9 on the relay because I thought that was pretty fast. And Erik was like very unimpressed because, he was recalling, when he went 51.8 at spring nationals, and I'm just making stuff up. But anyway, 51.9 I thought was pretty fast. And so she's had a really, really hard year in that, she was on track to make the Dutch Olympic team. You can read all the background on this. And then she had to sit out one of their qualifiers because her boyfriend, her husband, got diagnosed with COVID. So she had to quarantine. She couldn't sit out. And she basically watched as people replaced her on the Olympic stuff without any control over what is happening. Now she's going to the Olympics. She's a very fast swimmer. She's also somebody who's, she's 33 years old, and she's been swimming really, really fast for a really long time. She's always sort of somewhat been in the shadow of Chroma with JoJo in the Netherlands, but just somebody that's like maybe one of the most underrated, incredibly fast sprinters out there. And I'm really hopeful. I've always enjoyed watching her race, and it's just somebody that I cheer for because she's been so consistent, and she has these races like that relay split where she just swims absolutely unbelievable. And so that stuff is really fun to watch and gets me excited about Tokyo. All right, unless one of you raises your hand and says you've got something to add, I've got to open up my office. Oh, Eric, do it.
I wanted to make sure we kind of forgot the young gungan on the guys' side, the Popovici or whatever. I can't say it.
Popovici right. From Romania.
Yeah, with the 48.0 on that 100 freestyle, a young man just lighting it up. Well, not that he's going to be listening, but I didn't want to I didn't want to anger any of your Romanian listeners. Big
contingency coming in,
yeah. I think they're like easily 2 or 3 of the 7 people that listen to this. So
judging from the swim swam picture, he's got incredible hair too.
Yeah, he's got a nice flow going.
Oof.
I don't know what that's like, but I heard it's fun.
Well, you had a haircut like that back in the day, Eric.
Decades ago.
I've seen some of those high school pics of you. I mean, you like to go long. You like that. You had a little bit of a grunge look going,
Yeah, that was
when you were listening to Nevermind.
Yep.
In your basement. All right, guys, thank you so much for coming on to discuss everything. We've got thanks for another week. As usual, the checks are in the mail. I appreciate you both and look forward to talking to you next week.